up, everybody? Ghost Girl 77 here, and today's video is going to be Haunted Reads. Right now we are reading I Am Haunted, Living the Life Through the Dead by Zach Bagans. He's a paranormal. For those of you that are new to my channel, we've been reading this for some time now. And Zach Bagans is for some of you that don't know, there's a show on TV called Ghost Adventures, and Zach Bagans is the lead investigator in that show. And this is a book about stuff that happens in his life and in investigations and all sorts of things. Right now, today we're going to be reading page 116, chapter 14. Carrying Spirits. Can a human being harbor a second spirit? This is what this chapter is called. Carrying Spirits. Can a human being harbor a second spirit? Here's a theory. We travel the world looking for ghosts and waiting for spirits to show themselves at all hours of the day and night, desperately seeking that moment when they'll make themselves clear to us. But what if they're right in front of us the whole time and we just can't see them? What if there are spirits living inside the people we encounter every day? Typically, when heinous acts occurs in a house, the location is stigmatized. Think of the Sharon Tate murders in the mansion on I can't even pronounce that, but in north of Los Angeles. The house is demolished. The address is changed and a new structure is built to erase the shame, but it doesn't always work, and the spirits carry on. The second you set foot on the property at Fox Hollow Farm in Carmel, Indiana, you can feel that something very bad happened there. Our trip to the farm to film an episode of Ghost Adventures was weird and disturbing. The bodies of 11 men were discovered on the property in the 1990s, and the owner, Herb Bayumeister, was suspected of luring them all there to kill them, and was suspected of 9 more murders away from the farm. Bayumeister never confessed to the murders and committed suicide before he could be convinced. So one of the worst serial killers in American history remains a mystery. Still, it's undeniable fact that 11 men were killed on that farm. It may seem strange, but to me it felt like every piece of that property was holding on to those grisly deaths. It was infected, as if the bodies had fertilized the ground with their anger, as if nature itself had been affected by those heinous acts. While we were doing our research on Fox Hollow Farm, I learned the details of Herb Bayumeister's suicide. He fled in Ontario, Canada, and was found dead of a gunshot to the head on a bed of sand on the shore of Lake Huron. He was found with his arms straight out and dead birds surrounding him. He killed himself in a ritualistic way, and that stuck with me. Rob and Vicky Graves were the owners of the farm when we conducted our investigation. When I interviewed them and stared into their eyes, I could tell that something wasn't right. I felt like it wasn't them I was seeing. It was beyond them being uncomfortable. It was as if Herb's spirit was affecting them. Vicky seemed more submissive than I felt she should have been, and I read that Herb had the same relationship with his wife, Julie, who refused to let the police search the house for months until she was convinced that Herb was up to no good and had filed for divorce. Was he in the room, projecting himself onto the family like he had done to Julie? This uneasy feeling, combined with a strange heaviness inside the house, put me in a mood. The air felt stagnant, and in nearly every room I felt like I was being watched, which affected me. I wasn't my typical loud, enthusiastic, effervescent self, and I wasn't clear. I wasn't conducting a good interview, but I felt like I had the engine of a 50-year-old car whose oil had never been changed. I was sluggish and lethargic and couldn't figure out why. This led me to ask, are the people who live in the places plagued by gruesome events carrying those spirits inside them? There's a theory in the paranormal community called the stone tape theory, which says that certain natural materials can act like tape recorders and store the energies of the living. According to this theory, an event, usually one that involves a great deal of emotion or trauma, can somehow be captured in the stonework surrounding it and then replay like a recording under certain conditions. For example, an apparition of a miner running down a tunnel yelling cave-in could be an event that was recorded by the rocks themselves. The energy from the event is stored and can be released at any given moment, resulting in a playback that can be both heard and seen. The spirit usually acts out the event with no regard for the living in its presence. Fox Hollow Farm has barely been renovated since the Biomeester family lived there. It has an intercom system, and each time I touch it, I had visions of Herb using it to try to hunt down his victims inside the house. In the kitchen, there was a 1980s can opener that popped up out of the counter. I pushed a button and it popped up, and I imagined Herb opening a can of beans with it. The stone tape theory suggests that objects like these that were present during traumatic events can hold on to those events. But can people harbor the spirits of those who no longer with us? Biomaster killed himself in a realistic manner for a reason. Serial killers have to have control and work off of controlling their victims. They're smart. They kill and get away with it, often for a long time. That takes meticulous planning and intelligence. And though I'm certainly not praising them, it's not for the idiots of the world. So how does a ritualistic suicide in Ontario matter in Indiana? The way Herb killed himself tells me a lot about how this family is still being affected by him. I think that he killed one bird for each of his victims, believing that it was a way for him to remain earthbound instead of going to hell. I think he did this because he believed that he could stay in the house and continue to control anyone who lived there. But he treats the Graves family the same way he treated his own family, with respect. So is Herb's spirit still there, and is he possessing or controlling Rob Graves? Is Graves carrying around the spirits of Herb unknowingly? The whole time we were searching for Herb's spirit and believing that we were coming into contact with the spirits of his victims, We were actually talking to Herb in a way. After all, the Graves family lives in the house, in the same room that Herb inhabited, and uses the same everyday items that Herb used. Vicky Graves said that she felt scared at times, especially in the master bedroom, and she would shake at the thought of being in the presence of Herb's spirit. Rob, however, didn't flinch. He was adamant that the spirits were there in the house because Herb liked it here, and the victims are still here. He even had a creepy demeanor at times when Vicky seemed the most scared. Sometimes as we filmed, I would catch Rob watching us through the blinds, as if through Rob, Herb was keeping an eye on us so that we didn't learn too much. Or maybe to ensure that we saw something he wanted us to see. Rob also got uncomfortable when we talked about certain parts of Herb's life. I'm not saying that Rob Graves is a serial killer, but I couldn't shake the idea that the spirit of Herb could be affecting him. I think if you spend a long time in a place filled with bad energy, that energy becomes a part of you. And that's what was happening at Fox Hollow Farm. The people who lived in the locations we film for Ghost Adventures often ask us to investigate over here or over there, or ask us to come in early so we can find more, without realizing that the spirits are actually the ones guiding them. The spirits know what happened there and channel that information through the living. This was true of Fox Hollow Farm. The family pointed out details of the property, and I kept wondering if it could be the spirit of Herb or his victims, channeling information through them. As I said earlier, many places where mass murders or other atrocities occurred are changed or torn down in order to wipe away the memories. The ones that survive, like the Villiscax murder house in Iowa, are usually turned into tourist attractions. But Fox Hollow Farm was different. Not only was it still intact, but a family was living there among the remnants of Biomeester's life. They swam in the same pool in which Biomeester drowned people. They showed me pictures of bones of unnamed victims that were found popping up out of the ground in the backyard. Items that Herb might have used as murder weapons, like the house which he strangled some of his victims, were still being used. A serial killer is the closest thing to a demon walking the earth, and his family was living in his house with all the same stuff being there. No, not so fun facts. While we were filming, a sound bite in the backyard where the bones were found, something compelled me to look up at the stairs window. When I did, a curtain drew open and Rob Graves stared at me, but all I really saw was her Biomeester looking at me. Scared the crap out of me. So I just read this little part right here, like a little side note that he put. Deeply disturbing, and I can't help but think that Graves' family was being affected by Herb's spirit. The whole time we were looking for spirits in the nooks and crannies of a place, the spirit may actually be found in a person who lives there. Many spirits just want their physical bodies back, after all. They want to smoke a cigarette, eat a pancake, lay out by the pool, and feel the wind on their face or the touch of a loved one. The David Oman house in California is another prime example of a person rather than the location itself being haunted. David lives in a house that even the most intelligent and respected paranormal experts fear to enter. Barry Taff is a parapsychologist and PhD who has done more than 4,500 investigations using the most advanced equipment. Yet he says that the David Oman house is the only place he feared to set foot in again after investigating it once. Dr. Taff claims that the house almost killed him and that nearly every time he goes there, more than 20 visits so far, he winds up in the hospital. So I had to ask, how could someone live there and not be affected? When I met the owner, David Oman, I knew right away that something wasn't right with him. I couldn't tell if it was personal, mental, or the house. But it didn't take long for something powerful and dark to affect me and my crew. It seemed to control David Oman and was trying to gain control of us, too. The question was, what was it? The spirits at Fox Farm were easily to identify because of the murders that had been committed there. But the David Oman house was different. As far as we knew, no deaths had occurred on the premises. The house was in close proximity to the mansion where Sharon Tate and her friends were murdered by members of the Charles Manson cult. But that was all we knew of, and those murders had occurred at least 200 yards away in a house that's no longer there. Oman was quick to tell us that he feels he's being affected by Tate's spirit, but Dr. Taft felt that something more was going on, and I agreed. Taft described the energy of the house, my instruments, natural triofield meters, air on counter, etc., indicated bizarre and totally unprecedented magnetic fields amplified and polled throughout the entire house, combined with an ambient electromagnetic background anywhere from 20 to 100 times normal. This house was a compass needle's worst nightmare. In fact, we were several locations in David's home where compass needles would spin widely as if near a quarter pole, which does not occur in nature. And on other occasions, almost everything in the house seemed to be emitting a very strong magnetic field, including glass, wood, plastic, and leather, none of which are ferromagnetic or paramagnetic. While on the stairwell, disembodied voices could be heard, but were not always recordable. At times, it sounded like someone loudly snoring or with severe asthma. At other times, it was like very muffled conversations were occurring. If I stood on the stairway too long, I became dizzy and nauseous. Even more amazing is that the David Oman house allegedly sits on Native American burial grounds. Never a good idea. Benedict Canyon is said to have been a sacred burial area for Native tribes, but there's no way to know for sure whether this is true. There was no historians, no record keepers, and no technologies to record their lives, but we do know that natives lived, fought, sacrificed animals, and buried their dead in this area. They had no crystal ball. They couldn't have foreseen that one of the largest cities in the world would one day overtake their sacred land with tractors, homes, technology, parties, and even murders. We have to remember the way native tribes thought they had a relationship with Mother Nature on this land, and then we came along and desecrated it. Can you blame them for being pissed? I believe it cursed the spirits and taints the energy there. The land is not supposed to be disturbed, let alone have house built on it. It's like an Egyptian mound that shouldn't be open. In my opinion, the Sharon Tate murders only agitated the energy more. I think those heinous acts awaken something in the ground that either wants them to leave or wants vengeance. And whatever spirits were awakened are so strong that they are also affecting David Oman. David is a nice guy, but we had issues with him. When the cameras were off, he liked to argue. He would be nice one minute and then be causing problems with the crew the next. He made the biggest deal of the smallest issues, like a mark on a wall that made him snap. We were wary around him and almost scared of him at times because he was so unpredictable. He could turn into someone else at the drop of a hat. But was that really him? Or was it something manipulating him? David seemed to know when something paranormal was about to happen in the house. We were interviewing him once with the cameras off, and he could tell us when figurines were going to fall over or loud noises were going to be heard. He seemed to have a relationship with the spirits, and Dr. Taft even said that he may be a poltergeist host. He talked to the spirits the way a parent talked to a nosy child when the family has company, with tears scolding. At times we were almost investigating David instead of the house. Dr. Taft was definitely afraid of him. David Oman is another example of spirits living inside or through human beings, I believe. The affected people take on bizarre personalities and unpredictable behaviors. When I look into their eyes, I don't see the person, but the spirit inside them. Not their own spirit, but the spirit of someone else who's passed over. They are half alive and half dead, almost like zombies. They have a hard time answering questions because they confuse the history of their own life with the history of the spirit inside them. Like half their life is gone, or they just can't remember it. Haunted locations can change people. Maybe the spirits who refuse to leave that location. Maybe the spirits who refuse to leave that location also refuse to leave the people who live there. And that is the end for today. If you'd like more videos like this, then like and subscribe and comment to the comments below. And until next time, everybody, stay creepy and keep up the creeps.